Hello and thanks for checking out ChartGuys.com. We're proud to be one of the most successful technical analysis communities online, teaching you the skills to become a more confident, effective, and informed trader. Join our community of hundreds of analysts worldwide working together to learn the charts, generate profit, and achieve financial independence. For access to daily live chart analysis and market coverage, a thriving chat community, along with dozens of hours of exclusive educational materials. We look forward to seeing you. Let's check out some charts. Hey MJ friends, checking in on the Canadian sector here over the weekend. More bloodshed out there. It was really the weakness in the overall market, down over 1% today. Oil is oversold on the daily. So again, it's that continued narrative that the China-Trump trade war is causing a market pullback, and that market pullback is hurting the cannabis sector. The reason for that is the cannabis sector is high risk, high reward, certainly not a secure place to have money at this stage comparative to other names that issue dividends or have been established for 20 years. So they usually get hit harder when there is fear around. So what we're looking at on CGC is support of 40 psychological and 39.66. The daily RSI is close to oversold, not there yet. Same thing with SPY. The 4-hour RSI is just getting oversold, and we saw an hourly oversold bounce today that actually had a really nice move and follow through behind it, over 3%. And I was sitting there ready for this order, and I was going to buy on the $40 flush. I like when oversold pushes, get a last little climax push, trigger some stop levels. Then I like to make my entries. So I had an order filled out waiting for CGC to break 40. It didn't do it. And then I moved on to Cron and traded Cron instead. So that's me waiting for the trade to come to me. The trade did not come to me, so I don't go chasing it. I go elsewhere because we knew that on oversold bounces, we were likely to just form hourly lower highs. Anything under 41.55 on the hourly is just a lower high. And it's all about 39.66. If that level breaks, it's a notable break on the weekly time frame, but certainly at this point, we wouldn't expect too much further downside below 39.66. If that level were to break, the daily RSI would very quickly be oversold, and we'd be scouting for a short-term bounce. Anything on the daily under 45.78 is just a lower high, so the bulls are a long way away from shifting momentum in their favor. Cron, right off 13.90. That was a support level to be watching. Held to the penny, and I made my entry this morning on the break of $14. As soon as the $14 climax broke, I made an entry, got in at $13.99, and then scaled out on the way up. Certainly sold a bit too early, but locked in the day maker against the trend. Hourly lower high was set at 14.63, and certainly glad at this point that I sold on the loss of the daily higher low pattern of 15.17, because at this point it does not look likely that our monthly higher low is set due to market weakness. I'm still interested in Cron setting this monthly higher low, and we're still at the exponential support right there, but it may take another leg down. And that certainly looks like the more favorable scenario for both CGC and Cron. ACB dump continues. Daily RSI is on the verge of oversold. Weekly pullback here with the next support level of 701 psychological. And on the daily chart, anything under 853 is just a lower high. We're watching hourly lower highs for everybody that set them today. ACB hourly lower high is 785. And anything on Monday morning or Monday all day, anything under these hourly lower highs, just keeping the downtrend intact. I believe that the sector will bounce when we see oil bounce and when we see SPY bounce. And we did have some bullish news in the U.S. with Illinois being the 11th state with a solid population to pass recreational marijuana. So that's a plus 10% increase as far as states go in the U.S. for those that have legalized, now number 11. And that may take some attention away from Canadian names and put it on U.S. names for these oversold bounces. So I have to keep that in mind as well. APHA giving it all back, looking down at 638 as support. Hourly oversold conditions would be decent for an opportunity. If we were to head down to that support level, the hourly RSI would be oversold. And looking at it on the weekly chart, it's just a weak bounce and likely heading to lower lows. Short-term bounce, shorts covered, no follow-through. ACB showed us what no follow-through looks like, and APHA followed along. So 638, a few percent before we get to that next daily level. OGI had a great bounce play today, right off support. So both CGC with psychological 40, Cron with 1390, and OGI right off the support level of 715 were all great bounces. Hourly RSI being oversold, heading to key support, we went from 717 up to 743. So that's a significant bounce of about 4+% right off that support level. But bears are still in control overall, and we're on the verge of a bear break on the daily to change the trend. There's that head and shoulders pattern we were watching. I think we started pointing that out a while ago. So equilibrium is looking less likely. High, low, lower high, double bottom, but on the verge of a bear break after 715 will be 7 psychological. Hexo bear break taking place. As soon as we broke 652, that was the red flag, and now we're looking down at 588. This is the kind of scenario in the sector right now where if you're cash, this is great. Dump it, absolutely, get all red. And if you're holding positions, it hurts. It's painful to watch, and you just have to remember your long-term game plan. And for me, as a short-term trader and a day trader, on bull moves up, holders are always outpacing me because I'm flipping and I'm being protective and I'm keeping my profit and not giving it back. But it's these kind of pullbacks where traders are able to surpass holders in a significant way. Whereas, just as an example, Hexo at this point from the top has pulled back 25% almost. And OGI, remember we sold it, or I sold it right here on May 20th. I bought it on May 23rd. I sold half on the 24th and half on the 28th. And now I'm all cash again. So anybody that's been holding OGI as opposed to trading it, for those who are comfortable with trading and can put in the time and effort to learn how to do it, the traders are far ahead of the holders in many instances if they are cash on these pullbacks, or better yet, making profit to the downside, playing bearish on these pullbacks. TRST bear break of 740 getting followed through. Next support level is 7 psychological, and TRST is almost heading back down to the all-time low. There's not a ton of support. We're still a solid 20% above it, but there's not a ton of support down at these levels. Anything on the daily time frame under 799 is just a lower high. And remember, multiple years ago, CGC, what was the signal that we went bullish on CGC? For those of you that were watching back in 2017, it was the weekly trend changing. So we pulled back all summer, all spring and summer, and there was no rush for an entry. You don't have to nail the bottom. You can wait for trend changes, whether it's a daily trend change or a weekly trend change. But as soon as we saw this little higher low and higher high, that was the bull signal to be looking for entries. And then we saw the run up into the fall. So with the edible legalization or the edible legislation coming in at the end or in the fall of 2019, we're going to be watching for the same thing. Daily trend changes towards the end of the summer, early fall, will certainly have our attention. Until then, just playing short-term oversold bounces, remaining cash, and patiently waiting for more clear signals, with the most important signal coming from the overall broader market, showing some recovery in the S&P 500. So VFF continuing to pull back here as well. Again, the lack of support means we can pull back further. The 2-day time frame very likely to show us this equilibrium, low of 1029, high of 1438, and we're scouting that higher low compared to 1029. And this RSI on the hourly time frame, not quite getting oversold. At the lows, it was oversold. I'd love to see daily RSI get oversold and a pullback to $11 over the next couple of days. That'd be a great bottom fishing play off 1029 support with beat up RSI. TGOD dumping. Everybody's dumping. Weekly support breaking, lower highs and lower lows. Support is 352. That broke, so 306 is the next level here, and we're almost oversold on the daily, keeping in mind that when we bounce anything under 410 will be just a lower high. LABS, bear flag on the daily, confirmed. Video views are going down as I'm just saying bearish things. People are always more views and more pumped about bullish action, and these videos just fade in terms of people losing interest, not wanting to hear the bad news. But we're looking down now at 533 and 514 as support levels on labs, looking for the weekly higher low to form, but no indication it's formed yet. Oil's continuing to pull back, also looking for the weekly higher low. No support formed at this point. And anything on the daily under 63 cents is just a lower high. Established game plans. Hopefully you have cash. If you don't have cash right now and you've allocated all your funds, get driving on Uber, get flipping yard sale stuff, get on eBay, get as much cash as you can to take advantage of cheaper prices. I personally would be looking towards USMJ, just knowing that the laws will change eventually and knowing that when that happens, I mean, today some of the names at the end of the day in the USMJ sector ran 10% in about a half an hour on the news of Illinois passing, and that news was known as far as, a 95% chance of happening yesterday. But as soon as it was more official today, a lot of names ran quick, and that just shows you what news can do. And we know news is inevitable in the US MJ sector. It's just a question of whether it's 3 months from now, 11 months from now, 18 months from now. We don't have that answer, but it's probably a good idea to work hard and hustle and get as much capital as you can to put into some of these sectors that we know are going to develop. The best time to buy MJ was December, when the world was falling apart as far as financial markets go. And now that we have fear again in the market and we have oversold conditions approaching, that is a good time to be looking to enter as well if you're looking long term and you're going to set it and forget it. VGW 392 still just barely holding. We broke it by a penny, but we're on the verge of a bear break of this equilibrium. After 392 is 371. And Monday, the bears are going to try and get that convincing follow through from this tightening range. CXXI is just an absolute bear, and it's a pump and dump at this point. Just with the percentage moves, if you see that big run up, you run up 500%, and then you pull back over 50%, it's a pump and dump. Now, I'm not saying that means the company has no value or anything like that, but it's just clear that people were running it up. We saw it all on social media. And honestly, I look at this chart and I feel bad because I know how many people got caught up in that hype and euphoria and listening to people on social media, not establishing a game plan, not setting a stop loss. And right now they're in a lot of pain, and it's going to take 50% moves for a lot of people to even look towards break even. And that's just money that's being wasted. Whereas if, you have that cash to buy in on these extreme lows, specifically in USMJ, for me personally, it's just a completely different scenario to be in, and it can be psychologically taxing. We always want to avoid having losses, monetary losses in the market seep into our regular life and affect it. And it certainly does. And that's obviously not a spot we want to be in. NRTH, sell the news event for that license, that's for sure. Just gave it all back. And breaking support now, we're looking down at 97 and then 86. And the weekly time frame, really just a high, low, lower high. Bulls have to hold 85 for a higher low in this tightening range. KHRN, another one that's just falling apart. Daily RSI is one of the most beat up that you'll see in the MJ sector. Clear weekly lower highs and lower lows continuing. Our red flag was at 287, and just like that, we have now pulled back 15+% from that bear break. No support nearby. I'd be interested if we saw another red day or a gap down open for just a short-term oversold bounce. When we do find a temporary bottom, it'll likely be a very easy 10% bounce, but there's no sign of that bottom being set right now, and certainly high risk trying to catch that falling knife. So bottom line is, not a lot of happy camper bulls out there, unless you're bullish the sector and sitting in cash. Otherwise, we're just patiently waiting. I'm watching the USMJ sector that has more of my attention just because I believe the reward will have bigger gains 1 to 2 years out from now than the Canadian names, but there'll still be bounces in the Canadian names as well. And we're still watching the longer term monthly time frames, and we are waiting patiently for the overall market and for oil to give us a signal of a short-term bottom so we can get some bounces going in the MJ space, keeping in mind that those bounces, just like today, we knew those oversold bounces just going to set lower highs. It's going to take a lot to shift this momentum in a lot of these names for these bulls. This is where patience, establishing a game plan, and mowing some lawns for money comes into play. And I did that. Back when I was starting trading, I was doing all kinds of odd jobs. And some of them were landscaping and painting and flipping things on eBay and all that stuff. And there's no shame in that. Get your hustle on, get your entrepreneur on, and accrue that capital and then make it grow in the market. Appreciate you watching. Have a great weekend. We'll end it here with some gardening, and we'll do the USMJ video in a couple days or so, maybe tomorrow. Checking in with a garden update. We've got these little sour gherkin cucumbers going wild. Pretty much twice a day I have to adjust where they're climbing and grabbing as they get higher and higher. And I'm going to run out of space. Sending them along the side here. And you can see their little flowers and little cucumbers getting ready to go. Then we have the big boys over here climbing up. Got some cucumber production. Where are we? That big boy's growing real fast every day. And they're sending their own arms outward. Just letting them go wherever at this point. And there's a praying mantis that's been living here. I'll keep an eye out for him and try and get him. Tomatoes still flowering. Don't see any little tomatoes forming yet. Seems like the brandywine, which are these wider leaves, they seem more resistant to blight. But cutting those lower branches off definitely slowed everything down. And we got the basil still going. Got some zucchinis. And cilantro's flowering, so that's on its way out. But I like eating a little cilantro every day. Wildflowers still going. Now we got the potatoes from the compost pile. And some squash coming in from the compost pile as well. Not sure what varieties. Potatoes are huge. So I've hilled them up a couple times just by adding dirt to their base. Only one variety has flowered yet. And then they'll just die off eventually. And then you dig up the potatoes. Pepper flowers. This is some kind of spicy pepper. This is a butternut squash that's starting to expand. You can see the little baby butternut. And we got eggplant flower, and a lot of flea beetles have been eating this. You can see the leaves, these little dots. That's just little flea beetles taking tiny bites. Chard still doing its thing. Beans flowering. So they'll start producing, and one of these little guys, you'd be surprised how many string beans one of these will produce. Peas, they'll probably start flowering in the next week, but they're still climbing up. And every day I just have to come out here and help them hook on. Another winter squash, and the kale and the collard greens are going on. And that fan, I don't know if you've seen the YouTube video, but for mosquitoes, you mix warm water, yeast, and sugar, and that puts off CO2, which is what mosquitoes see or smell to bite us. And then the fan sucks them to the back. And so I come every morning and rescue the guys who are not mosquitoes.